Good morning. I'm going to talk largely about the town where I lived in southern British Columbia in Canada. But got all kinds of things running through my mind that might surface as well. Grand Forks is right on the US border, just north in Canada. Kind of north of Spokane, but farther west. It's a beautiful valley. There's a river that runs through the valley called the Kettle River, and another one that flows into the Kettle River called the Granby River. And the Kettle flows down across the US border and into the Columbia River. So I was fortunate to grow up close to the Kettle River. And when we moved there from Ontario in 1959, I saw that we had a house not too far from the river and just a little walk away, and there was a steel railroad bridge across the river. So we would hear trains go over the bridge, not very far from our house really. And once in a while there were speeders, I think we called them, that would run along the tracks, and they were just little motorized carts with one or two or a few men in them that were often doing maintenance on the railroad tracks. But right around that time, or I guess it was a couple years before, the Russians had sent up a Sputnik, and I didn't know. I was too young or not aware enough to know anything about the Sputnik. Nobody told me. I just heard the word, really. I would have loved to have known more about it. But I got the Sputnik confused with the speeders that were running along the railroad track. In my town, Grand Forks, a lot of the people, maybe over half, were Russian immigrants or descendants of Russian immigrants who came to Canada about the year 1900. So a lot of the words floating around were Russian words, and when I heard Sputnik, I thought, well, maybe that's speeder. So it took me many years later, in fact, I'm probably still learning it, that what a Sputnik was a spaceship that was sent up from Russia, the first one that circumnavigated the Earth. Anyway, so that was a confusion. So the railroad bridge, I guess when we were first there, it started to get into winter time, or it was, I think it was September 1959. So my dad had to find work. So he and both my brothers and myself, in fact, at 9 years old, worked in the potato fields. My dad and my brothers were loading sacks of potatoes onto the truck. We used our own truck. I think it was a 3-ton truck, something like that. They would lift the big 100-pound sacks, I think was standard, sacks of potatoes onto the truck. I think prior to that, they used to use a pitchfork or something and, load the potatoes into a bin or something. But by that time, the machine that went along allowed the potatoes to flow into potato sacks, and then the sacks were just left on the field. And so my dad and my brothers were loading them onto the back of the truck, and I was driving the truck. I guess I wasn't strong enough. Probably my brother Don wasn't either, but we all did the best. So I was driving the truck down the rows in the field, and they would load the sacks. And from time to time, my brother or one of my brothers or my dad would come up to the cabin. We were just creeping along very slowly. They would kind of reach in and pull the throttle out a little more or push it in a little bit to speed the truck up or slow it down. They had a better way of knowing what speed we needed to be going. So I was basically steering, but I think at the end of the row I would get to turn the truck around, or maybe someone else did that. But that was one of the first jobs I remember. Then we also loaded apples into a railroad boxcar in town. I think I got to help with that. And so my dad did a lot of odd jobs. And I think my brother eventually went out of town and got a job in a mine somewhere, some other place. And then winter came, and I don't remember much about winter. I guess we stayed indoors a lot, and I tried to go sleigh riding and build snowmen and snow forts and things like that. I was in fourth grade, grade 4, and my teacher was Mrs. Graham, and she was a very great teacher. And I remember we got to do a play. I had done a play in Ontario in this, I guess, the first grade. I knew I'd jump back here to earlier years. The play, let's see, the way it started in grade 1 in Ontario was that a little girl asked the teacher if she could bring up her dolly in front of the class and talk to her doll. And so she did this cute little thing where she talked to the doll, and maybe the doll talked back or something. And all the boys' hands shot up. They wanted to do something too. And I remember the boys who always sat in the back were Yannick, who was really short, and French primarily, and Herbie, who was really tall. He probably should have been in, third grade or fifth grade or something, but I guess he didn't have a chance to graduate. So there was Herbie and Yannick. I don't remember the others. I'd mentioned Henry before, but Yannick was really the ringleader. And all of us kids had watched on TV a show called The Last of the Mohicans, or we'd heard about it anyway. And this was, a lot of fighting between the Indians and somebody else, maybe the Indian tribes or something. And so Yannick said, we want to do The Last of the Mohicans. So the boys went up to the front of the classroom and we started fighting, and we ended up in this big dog pile, and it was just totally outrageous. And the teacher finally managed to pull us apart and stop us. I think Yannick was Hawkeye, the head guy. Anyway, that, to my mind, turned into quite a disaster, and I think from the teacher's point of view as well. So then later on, I believe we did an organized play, and the rich man and the poor man, or something like that. And there was a poor man and his wife, and I played the rich man. And I'd never been in a play before, but I immediately came up with an accent that sounded kind of like a rich man. And it was a wonderful experience for me to be this other character. I could just do whatever I wanted as that character, and I wasn't shy. So that was the first time I remember being in a play. And then that was first grade, and then fourth grade in Grand Forks, British Columbia, we did a play called Lost Cap. Kind of a funny name. I think my name was Lost Cap in the play. And I got a pretty good part, and I got to, say my lines and everything, and it was really neat. And I practiced the lines to get them good. And then, I guess it was fifth grade, we did Darby and Joan, and that was really fun. And then continued on doing other plays, especially through high school. Anyway, so that was kind of the winter time, and in fourth grade in school. But then in the spring, the snow melted, and it was pretty fun. I would make trenches, for the melting snow to run away from the yard. And then people started planting gardens, which kind of everybody in that town grows a garden, it seems. They're all really good at it. And then we started swimming. Well, I didn't because I didn't know how to swim. But we would go to the railroad bridge and walk across the bridge. And there was a little kind of almost like a pond there where the kids would swim. And the older kids would swim on the near side of the river in the really deep water, which could go 15, 20 feet or so deep. But my mother told me I had to, stay on the shallow pond area. And so I learned how to swim because my dad told me you lie on your back and then you just move your hands up and down. And I tried that and I got better at it and kind of worked. And then I also learned how to put my head in the bathtub underwater. And I thought, well, if I can do that in the bathtub, I can do that in the river. And I also remember putting my head in a bucket of water. It's like, wow, I can keep my head in this bucket for a little while, hold my breath. And so I figured out how to swim. And then mostly I would dog paddle, but then I would do the overhand stroke. And my mother always told me I had to stay in the shallow pond, which was maybe only 2 or 3 feet deep, not very deep. But one day I got so frustrated that all the other kids were swimming in the other area, so I think I went over and swam in there. You just stay in the shallow part. But I told my mother, I guess I couldn't. All the other kids were there, so I had to do it, and so I think she understood, but she was concerned, of course. So the main thing, though, about the railroad bridge was that kids would jump off the bridge into the water. So you'd walk, kind of halfway along the bridge, and you'd climb out to the edge of the girders, and then you'd jump and go down, I don't know, 15, 20 feet into the water. And so I saw, mostly the bigger kids were doing it, but I thought I want to do that. So I sat on the girder on the edge of the bridge, and I sat there every day, 3 days, I think. I'd go and sit there and, trying to get brave enough to jump. And finally, one bigger kid said, if you don't jump, I'm going to throw you off the bridge. And that was enough motivation for me that I finally jumped. And after that, it got progressively easier to do. And it was a lot of fun. But the really big kids, or the grown-ups, they would climb up the girders up to the very top of the bridge, one of those steel railroad bridges with the overhanging trusses. And so I thought I would like to do that. I don't know if I probably didn't do that the first year, but I finally climbed up there, and it's a pretty difficult climb. In fact, I went back to Grand Forks quite a few years later, and I started climbing up to the top, and I felt shaky. I thought, oh man, I'm feeling kind of shaky here. And then I realized what I have to do is hang on really tight with my hands, just have a real strong grip with my hands as I'm climbing up, and then I felt secure. But so I think when I jumped off the top for the first time, I must have been older. I must have been late teens or something, maybe. I don't know now. But I remember it. Anyway, I jumped off, and I jumped off a lot, and I became one of the main jumpers from the top of the bridge. And there was another bridge in Grand Forks called the Nursery Bridge, also a railway bridge, and I used to jump off that one as well. And it was a little bit higher, I think. And you could only jump on one side because there were power lines running along, I think, as I recall. And the Nursery Bridge, one time, my friend Tom and I decided to see how many times we could jump off the bridge. We jumped off the lower part, which was quite a bit higher than the steel bridge near my house. But we jumped and then we climbed back up and we jump again. And I think we both jumped 50 times in a row. We just kept going and going and going. So I think we had the record for that. But I would jump off the top a lot. And even over the years, for quite a number of years, when I'd go back, I would jump off the top of the bridges. So that was a fun. And I mentioned the swamp next to my house before. And there was a wooden raft in the swamp. There was, I don't know, maybe about a foot of water or a couple of feet of water. So you'd use a long pole and you'd push your raft along with this pole. So that was really fun. It wasn't a really big water area, but I did that a lot, pushing with a pole and getting good at it. And then in winter, the swamp would freeze and it would be ice, so you could run along the ice in the swamp. And then some part of the year, the swamp would dry up, maybe later in the summer. And then you could just run in there, and it was pretty dry, mostly dry. We would have bulrush fights. There were all these bulrushes, cattails, and we would throw them at each other, and we'd kind of build forts, and you'd get a cattail, and you'd kind of knock it over somebody's head, and all this feathery stuff would come out all over them. We had a lot of fun things we did. One time I was playing soccer at the school, which wasn't too very far from our house, and a kid came and I don't know exactly, but he kicked me in the ankle, like on purpose, and it was like he didn't like me or something. And my mother just happened to be walking along the street adjacent to the playground at that time, and I was so embarrassed that this kid, not liked me and kicked me. I think my mother would have thought maybe I'd go out and start walking with her, but I kind of went in the opposite direction. It was just getting dark, and I hid out in the swamp. I was so, I don't know, ashamed, I guess, is the word. And it kind of had a bit of a sprained ankle, but I don't know. I was just so embarrassed, I guess. And so my mother was looking for me, and they were calling out, and then my dad got involved, and I think neighbors, and they had flashlights, and it was dark by then. I found a really good hiding place where, I was very knowledgeable about that swamp and the places to hide, and I was well within talking or shouting distance of anyone, but they weren't able to find me. And I think hours went by, and I guess they gave up the search party. They figured I don't know what they thought, but finally I got tired of hiding, and I went to the house and I climbed in through my bedroom window and got in bed. And so that was no good because no one knew I was home. So I made a bunch of noise moving the bed or something, and then my dad heard the noise and he came in. He said, "Yeah, I told you he would be there." Anyway, that I guess I never did explain my behavior to them, but I was, pretty insecure and shy, and